Yeah, I wanted to get this in real quick. Yeah, I was thinking about the memory minus de facto equaling 35, and like NASA and Dodge, and like the Austin Powers thing about the state capital, Austin, and ultimately Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, and paralegal. But anyway, I was thinking about something about that because of uh, uh, once again, because it seems that sometimes the humor of what international relations and compatibility with importing and exporting and factors of like international banking systems and um, all the astrological findings stuff about you know, uh, what the International Space Station is the acronym ISS, and even the Pentagon Reserve Reverse Drummer and stuff about, all that intelligence and opposite and all that stuff, the ISS, International Space Station, or International Superstar, and supplemental security, or the superstar investment. Yeah, so anyway, kind of like the acronym thing about it. But anyway, I was thinking about something about that, and um, as far as the safety I'd mentioned, is it the absentee voting you're looking for? It's like this is year 2023, and quite a bit has like really gotten me to a point of like whether if tolerance is really going to be the only issue of another thing about it. But yeah, so anyway, so I was thinking about a little bit about the humor of sheet music, and the factor of like the distinguishable difference between production and reproduction, or the thought of artificial, superficial architectural structure and design as compared to maybe the human factor of sustaining vibrato. It's kind of like um, hey, that looks like mine, right? But does it sound like mine? Or the thing about the is it the absentee voting you're looking for, or is it the occupational safety you're looking for, and the OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, and the human factor of what there's normally involved with like structures and construction and building. Building being 78, and alphanumerics are like FBI Miracle and Escrow and Hard God, and not to excuse it, because I haven't really used the word building quite a bit, well, for quite some time, but I mean, it's an automatic perception of what I'm referring to now, but it seems to be a little bit of the humor of like is the absentee voting, and this being really kind of like the year 2023, the next presidential term in office will be like the sixth presidential term in office that has the same similarities of like, difference between from Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt, and how that's actually calculated, and what that is to like Six Flags and national anthems that way. Something about a circuit of, really, how could it not be a Stargate program, and based upon, going through something that would be like CBS World News would normally suggest, the one word experience, of not limited to the circuit, but as well as like a networking circuit of like hospitals and certain factors of like the James Madison Dolly thing, and what that is to airborne and life flight in a circuit, going to a circuit likewise, and manufacturers. Been something had been an issue of like a completely dependent on memory, if that's even possible, really truthfully. So, and the thing of it is that it seemed to be that really the Abraham Lincoln night vision of the hood ornament, Lincoln Continental, the rectangle ultimately being something, of like wide world of sports, or the wide area, or what that rectangle on the hood ornament being vertical to a 90-degree is, or the 90-degree right angle, or what that is to Brazoria, being, the alphanumerics of 90 and Parallax X's, or, really what that is in, global positioning systems, likewise, in addition to like, the longitude and latitude factor of something in my mind that I see as a marginal spread of a tennis court, depending upon whether or not that the actual singles is really representing the Y2K, or the doubles, the singles are representing 2, yet identified as singles. And then there's the doubles that rarely represent 4, using 2. I mean, the sequencing characterization in sets of 4, only using 2 numbers, is almost like the doubles of the tennis court itself, or vantage low 30, and really what that is, to a marginal spread. And that's my point about something about the equator being the deal about the global positioning systems involving, exponential quotients in a way of like pi r squared, and Abraham Lincoln night vision in that thing about going through a circuit, and really what that is in space exploration or color code, even state statutes annotated, or beyond the caviar and the primates spawning in the front lines of the beach run. And at this point, it seems to be like really the thing about the Highway 59 in West Loop 610 Houston, about Univision and the pastels, and my memory of seeing two sets of four at different times. I mean, it wasn't even any kind of thought other than just the perception of just like glancing at it. Not even the thought of, hey, a pastel then, or even recognizing how many. I mean, even at the time, just glancing by Univision, driving by on the way to the drum shop, what was then, at Chimney Rock. Not even identifying chimney as like a normal standard of a rectangle to begin with, or even like, my home even having a chimney, and didn't even compute to anything like really. Even after I started getting in, only really truthfully, something about a 247 degree, and it being something about diagonal in the way of catty corner, was really the only thought when I got to a certain point, beyond June of 1992, really of a flag day baptism for real. And June 14th, 1992, but the thing is that really, truthfully so, I mean, for real. But anyway, ultimately, I was kind of like thinking about the deal about the humor, and how it leads to the very much, it's the humor that has really led so very many times involving, it would be whether it's a corporate relation or international relation, or what that is, import and exporting, and all that stuff about, some degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation, and ultimately it's kind of like something that the memory, being de facto, it was like a huge deal about the Bureau of Printing and Engraving involving the rectangle, or identifying high-rise buildings or buildings in places that had normally not been identified with like an engraved granite stone, like on a high-rise building or a commercial building or venue, if it's going to be a distinguishable difference of what a fixture in real estate is, or any access easement of like integration that would represent what a fixture is in real estate, as compared to any compatibility of dimensional clause or direct circuit that way of a commercial venue, as compared to what would be only a neighborhood of like a residential in a way, or something beyond, and what I'm talking about is similarly, the redundant frequency. But anyway, it's kind of like about the humor, about the artificial, superficial architectural structure and design, as compared to how that reverberation would only be a factor of maybe the artificial, superficial architectural design, as compared to the human factor of like the sustaining vibrato, or what that is to like the whole note treble double clef, and some humor about the whole note, and the HTTP :// and Austin Powers Blue Bonnet Imperial Eagle, and the difference between like the onion rings and the union, say the union, the thought about that in the Hi-O Silver, one of the oldest governmental computer mainframes identified as the Whopper, and ultimately, really, the thing about the moat, or the misappropriation allocation of like the Mississippi and the Delta Force, or what the isometric volume represents in a way of a high rise, or is it absentee voting you're looking for, or is it the safety, the occupational safety you're looking for, or the thing about the end god, or the biggest mouth of the river right next to the biggest part about the ocean, being the Delta Force, a representative of triangle with pi r square factor, even though the rectangle applied to the triangle, a schematic triangle representing the delta, normally the delta representing automatically the audio side, what is normally now a standard of like both of MP4 as compared to MP3, which would be almost a perception of a schematic of audio in that way of a triangle, like identifying a mouth of a river, or misappropriation of the Mississippi in the way of like what the Euphrates, the Nile, or the connectivity of the Nile of the thing biblically. Likewise, in addition to certain factors of the book at a presidential level involving the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, and it seems to be like the book, Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. In that way, it's almost like uh, like the thing about the presidential reference that way, or a Godhead, and some transition between geographics that way of dimensional clause and direct circuitry of the same areas, the same locations, even in the Europe thing. I mean, biblically, the thing about the DC and and what that is. Yeah, in reality, of even including the Vantage Love 30 thing about the big triangle between like Africa, or the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Club Med thing, or the hospital thing about the thing about Club Med, or the doctor thing about the PhD, and really ultimately getting to like even maritime law, like what the Caribbean means, and maritime law to maybe only a duration would be maybe separating from like constitutional law of a color code normally of black, or representing maybe a state statute annotated in a way of like a Abraham Lincoln night vision, or even space exploration that way of like VSAT communication, or a Star is Born, beyond the airborne stuff about it. But the thing with this is that really in global positioning systems, which globalization is like the word in international financial management, going beyond, the halo venue of a toilet, and what that is to Commonwealth. I mean, the terminology of like Commonwealth and globalization, it can be leaked. It's very rare, but I had to look for that when I started really kind of maybe almost anticipating the thought of Commonwealth and globalization being, the thing about the, food, and what solid state is to, the toilet, or, making my mind up kind of thing, about what international relations, or, the compatibility. I mean, the human factor as compared to, the artificial, superficial architectural structure and design, really, even though, what I was getting to now, the reverberation. I mean, is it the artificial, superficial architectural structure of design representing the difference between production and reproduction, as compared to the human factor of like a sustaining vibrato? What reverberation really is, based upon architectural design as compared to the human factor, which would be still the same of like a sustaining vibrato, almost representative in a way of like not necessarily anything other. I mean, I don't know if the word would even be the word to use right now about it, about acoustic, suggesting structural design is more so about what acoustic is about, defining a category of like of design and instrumentation, and the human factor as compared to architectural structure. Yet it's still a structure and design. How true any compatibility of the word structural, excuse me, architectural. I mean, if it's going to be distinguished the difference between hardware and software, between architectural structure as compared to maybe the human factor involving software, like a sustaining vibrato, or measuring cycles per second in oscillation based upon only whether frequency is only going to be the factor of only bandwidth and spectrum, as compared to waveform that goes into a little bit more than attenuation and digital signal processing speed, which is completely not so dependent upon oscillation, like measuring cycles per second of frequency, not necessarily waveform of special effects. It's almost the same, but really not at all. So anyway, it's kind of like the deal. Think about the artificial, superficial, structural design as compared to the human factor of like a sustaining vibrato. It's kind of like the compatibility of the word being a relation between, once again, the architecture and platform. And the thing about the equator is kind of like it's the beyond the major of an alternative of a minor, where it's going to ultimately result in the flat. I mean, sheet music. I mean, for real. And what that is to embedding encryption and the operator, like once again, the thing about assembly, ultimately where I'm at, like just thinking about everything involved, it's almost like the absentee voting thing of isometric volume in a way. Yeah, of like the Delta Force, or what that is beyond the front lines of the beachfront, or the absentee voting in a way of like the delta force being representative of what one triangle and schematic would mean to a 6-point star and the Israeli flag, the Star of David being, the absolute Christianity thing about the code blue, or the sky in a way, kind of like that, and the whole note treble double clef seemed to be like the one about, something of HTTP colon double forward slash, the colon, or you obviously in punctuation and all that, a colon, semicolon, and something about the humor, okay, but I mean, it leads, I mean, it's only the humor that really leads to like really the real deal about real serious degreed brains about it, for real. So anyway, I was thinking about that because of the thought of the sheet music and the equator, and it's getting to like a whole note and a treble double clef, representing, the almost like the pi r square factor of variables, sometimes identified in position that would be maybe representative of the degree, like 0 degree would be like the equator of like point of origin, or reference as where only maybe the isometric volume would only present maybe in some blueprints that might reflect three-dimensional electrical participation as a point of origin of like the Z offset, representative of like an isometric volume, or like even a method of banking beyond, local area networks, and a degree level involving more so of like a wide area. Well, anyway, so it's like it gets to the deal about during going through a circuit, and the memory minus de facto, as compared to what litigation normally is associated as automatic legal, corporate legal term. Litigation normally is given the impression based upon, dependent upon, whether if the dimensional clause is only a duration, intellectual duration of like K television, or distinguishable difference of the memory minus de facto as compared to litigation. Because normally, all the way up into the United States Supreme Court, normally de facto gives the impression that litigation is the automatic thing in a venue of the United States Supreme Court, when in fact, corporate law is normally not even in any kind of court, normally, really, truthfully at all, even in the United States Supreme Court. Yet all that stuff about international law having fair use of access easements in the form what only a neighborhood might only represent, as maybe a non-degreed thing about the word opportunity. Or you know what that is to employment, or classified as compared to maybe even, a minimum of an associate's of a degree. Not that it's the degree, in my opinion, it's still in need of, even convincing anyone, especially me, that the word is even education, even at an associate's level, really might only be the distinguishable difference of whether it's like, involving an international law firm or not. So in any case, yeah, so automatically, the deal about classified as and the word opportunities, you've heard it before, equal employment opportunity would only maybe normally not be identified as what, having fair use of like the amendments of like the freedom of press, freedom of speech, or why the Fifth Amendment is not the non-profit organization. I mean, those seem to be the three big deals about the accusation of its available information and not knowing it's not the excuse. And, it's kind of like, hey, it's like, hey, you already know. It's like, oh wow, it's like, really, I'm accused of knowing that, and it's amazing. I do, so why didn't I know that with what I already know, I mean, really, it's the connectivity, it's phenomenally, it's like, really seriously experienced for real, realizing how serious actually sounding like knowing is ridiculously is sometimes naive. It's like not even hearing oneself even speak the only words coming out of their own mouth sometimes. I mean, for real. But anyway, that's really not the deal, and I don't want to go on about that, But anyway, so like it was kind of like getting into the absentee voting. This is the year 2023, and the next presidential term, based upon the election of like this year 2023 being November now, and in January of like 2024 will be the sixth presidential term as a point of origin of like between the Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt of the New Deal Act, and what that is to a method of banking or degree level, or world class. So I mean, it seemed to be really here recently something about going through a circuit and even the memory of something that seemed to be. I just now saw it. It's kind of like something about the memory of like a, and how true it is about the information that's being provided. And real quick, it's kind of like almost like a nation using the word country and the North American, deal about at least K television, K radio, and virtually every publication and newspaper, what was then the Houston Post, the Houston Chronicle, or magazines identifying normally a nation as a country, and many people might not even distinguish, if not assume, that's the way it really is. When in fact, like the euro dollar representing really 7 nations, not really countries at all. Might only maybe somewhere, maybe think of maybe a golf course, maybe representing maybe a country club, maybe in a way of like even the naivety still at that point of like international banking systems, anything, maybe having fair use of the U.S. dollar or local area networks of currency and circuit and everything about it. And the thing of it is that really ultimately gets to whether or not if the degree of international banking systems of circuit and currency over the categorization of money, or what that is even to the English Parliament. And once again, the English on another continent called England, it's like, hey, you speak English. How long have you known you speak English, right? I mean, if it's really going to be or not, if a degree level is only really ultimately getting to supplemental security income and every bit of information that is similarities of like major universities of the highest possible score of an SAT being 2,400, 2,400, or in my mind, seemingly even of Nostradamus, a Orson Welles narrated thing about the accuracy of Nostradamus' predictions being 400 years beyond the year 2000 being the new millennium, based upon everything about the information in that. It seems to be like very pertinent information that way of the SAT. Even, the Amadeus and the Amadeus thing about what seems to be like the wide world of sports thing about the Bureau of Imprinting and Engraving of a rectangle of like the Abraham Lincoln night vision going through a circuit, obviously a Stargate program, in my memory, like going through it, that being obviously a major factor of like that would be the only visual of any reality of like perception, would be only just like a visual comprehending normal thought process during a Stargate program, being the thing about what litigation is de facto as compared to memory minus de facto, and being 35 in NASA and Austin Powers, and and a visual like a photographic memory might not even have the significance of like a normal perception, anything other than maybe not going through one or experiencing something like the word of CBS and world news of like experience, as compared to what having fair use of intellectual property is, or an intellectual duration that in my mind seems to be the rectangle of like the Lincoln Continental being vertical at a 90 degree would be the wide world sport thing, but the Bureau of Imprinting and Engraving that way of buildings and high rises going through it with only that memory. And really only television being involved and it being made available would possibly the only way of actually even having any thought of like memory being provided, going through a circuit that way of like that fact. And it seemed to be like the thing about the Soviet Union, and it's identified as a Kremlin. But how true it is, I don't even know if it's the Kremlin at all. But it's something about my perception of like going through a circuit. It seemed to be like ultimately getting to all the gold and the red carpet thing about just like walking through a full attendance thing about it, and a memory thing about what it's supposed to mean, and if it's really even the Kremlin, excuse me, at all. In any case, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to something about the thought of um, world powers in a way of like every language in a way of what HTTP:// might only provide as computer programming and language of what international law means to international banking systems and world powers of like a world class, or what powers and principalities is in that way, having a local area network and having fair use of the characterization of money, geographically suggesting the U.S. dollar, or some memory of like of like an act of God, being like 71 in Pearland. Well, anyway, so it's like it's kind of like it gets to like Sarbanes and Oxley, financial instruments and SOX compliance. I'm thinking about what that is. So anatomy as compared to the Bureau of Vital Statistics as well as the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, and it seems to be that rectangle of identifying factor at one location is plaza, and the other in Geneva, Switzerland, being the being venue yet of the summit meetings with all the flags and the building being venue of like a human capital investment terminology yet of human civil rights. And I mean, if all that's ultimately getting to like a premeditated, I mean, even before I was born, okay, my name is Wade, okay, Wade Sterling, pretty, it's a map, okay, P-R-I-D-D-Y, Texas, pretty Texas, huh? And it's kind of like it really seems to be like really getting to the alphanumerics of whether or not if a local area network beyond the front lines of the beachfront or international financial management of SANS software is the software of like international financial management, not limited to what the color code of like beyond the front lines of the beachfront means to, immigration, customs enforcement, or, import and exporting, or, whether a passport and visa is only an issue of whether a degree level is like even in need of anything other of and maybe only a destination that might only reflect maybe maritime law in a way of like what liquid equity means as compared to a degree level, not put into a situation that might require secured, identity or, not the thought of like a piracy in the way of only what a non-agreed issue might only mean in maritime law as compared to a degree level of like an infringement upon like royalties and like a proclamation declaration of like the mayor's office, or what degree level is, or what's bartered and traded in like North American Free Trade Act as compared to NATO or North Atlantic Treaties Organization, or something I mentioned previously of the North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization, and what the Native American Indian is to the word peace. Okay, because I've seen it NATO so very many times on world news, even national news, very rarely. I mean, on national news, very rarely even getting national news to even say something about NATO. Normally, I mean, really isn't going to happen on national news. It's amazingly, or is it just like me? I mean, if it's ultimately getting to a degree level of only what civil or the distinguishable difference between settlement as compared to annuity. Annuity. I mean, if litigation is the only word of corporate terminology that normally isn't even involved with anything or any connectivity of criminal law. Litigation is normally like a civil deal of like, financial terminology, not necessarily a behavioral deal of antisocial or a thought of maybe of war or antisocial behavior that is in need of management that would only reflect maybe, what the Native American Indian really was provided as a reservation or reserve reverse, a Pentagon reserve reverse issue of the fact of like what a reserve is to a reservation to a Native Indian, although a given of what management might only seen the necessary to provide that way to present maybe a factor that would eliminate the and redesign and instruct behavior in a more civil way with a given. And that's something almost like I see in a way of a given of like a grant, a Pell Grant, as compared to a GI Bill or the forbearance. It seems to be so like something about the the total freedom of like perception of I wouldn't use the word evidence. I mean, if it's all verifiable legal media and deposition as what a guaranteed student loan is to a Pell Grant. When a grant is involved, and I mean, why isn't the grant covering the entire full amount? Or is it like litigation minus de facto? Or is it really the thing about memory minus de facto? Or is it just like it's been also manufactured to this very second, like in my words coming out of my mouth at this very second? My name is Wade, okay? And I mean, is it that my name has been like only a liquid equity of like maritime law? Or maybe, the naivety of like Roe v. Wade, or, some biblical reference in the way that would even suggest something involving Pharaoh, the firstborn. And if the front lines of the beachfront only means importing and exporting, or immigration in the way of the firstborn, of citizenship, or whether or not if citizenship will ever be the reality of only maybe a result of a generation, and it being the firstborn that way, of import and export or the immigration customs enforcement is kind of like what I'm talking about with the Pharaoh thing in Egypt and the Christian thing about the, Moses being 71 in Pearland, or, something, humor about the Moses riding, anyway, something about, the halo venue, beyond, the white stuff thing about the architectural design of a toilet being predominantly white until it gets to the governmental structure of the high-o silver thing about the toilet. The high-o silver thing of one of the oldest governmental computer mainframes called the Whopper. How the Whopper leads to, the kingsmanship of like a misappropriation or allocation of the Mississippi involving the Delta Force in a triangle, representative ultimately of a pyramid in Egypt. That way, schematically in electronic power, the Delta Force is normally even identified on sororities in major universities as the Delta. Normally the Sigma Alpha Delta Kappa Phi. Very rarely, a lot of major like degree graduate, if the word's even alumni, when the fraternity and sorority is really the thing about the campus. Excuse me. And really, ultimately, it gets to be whether or not if the curriculum is the only reality of the exclusionary rule provision of executive powers, governmental amnesties, and sovereign immunities. In my mind, automatically now, Wyatt Earp and John Wayne thing about, panning for gold, or the pearl, the thing about the pearls, and Calamity Jane of like the Postal Service, and what Calamity Jane is to even Elvis Presley and the clam bake thing, ultimately getting to, the pearl, and is it panning for gold, or really how the clams really got in the river to begin with, and the thought of a pearl in the ocean as compared to provided, how did the clam even get to in the river, for real. In any case, so like there's the salmon that like go upstream and like climb the ladder in the river thing. Like the salmon, they travel upstream. But how do the clams get there, right? Sure. It's a Samsonite thing, right? Yeah. Salmon on garlic, right? Has some extra baggage and luggage. Brought some clams with them going upstream, right? Yes, sir. Anyway. So like it got to the point of like a memory of like, places that going through a circuit would only be thoroughly dependent upon memory, and actually getting it to be activated, without television and radio and certain factors of pictures, even screensavers, is really when I realized something about memory. Completely, I was looking at it, and I noticed it, a sequence of like certain pictures of screensavers, and I noticed that several times, but the connectivity of actually being there, and when I realized something about one picture on a sequence and series of like screensavers provided by Microsoft, and one picture of like a European museum, it seemed to be like the wealthiest European museum. To me, like when I was like going there, so it was like looking at it and realizing something about the marble checkered floor and the statues, and it seemed to be like a funeral home, but that's what I'm talking about. Something about going through like a Stargate program, okay? But anyway, and when I realized that, and I was looking at it on screensaver, and that I was like looking at it many times, and I knew I'd seen it different times, kind of repeatedly over a period of years, and then I realized that, hey man, memory was like the issue, and that's when I really knew to really kind of not really look for it, but when I really realized that, it's not like that I was looking for it, but realized something about the memory minus de facto, that way being 35, and like NASA or what space exploration is, or the thing about it. But anyway, something about the Soviet Union and all that gold and the red carpet thing, and what that is, and it's kind of like it's almost like where I'm at with the thing about the absentee voting thing. If that's the only thing that's ultimately whether or not a high-rise building, or OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, if that's really the deal about the artificial, superficial architectural design, and reverberation and vibrato as compared to the human factor, or Geneva, Switzerland, in a way of like human civil rights is, involving the summit meetings, and that being venue, being the rectangle, how true it is, really only a memory of like just a photographed brief moment of just being able to have my eyes open and going through something like that. it came to the realization that something about the human civil rights and human capital involving that, and now it's kind of like the whether or not if the Kremlin is even, the thought of like all the gold interior with the red carpet. I mean, I know that information is provided, and not really being, a known fact of like geographically knowing, is that I'm already aware of that fact of what information is being presented as whether it's a known or not fact in networking, or degree level of only what really opportunity is of a non-degree situation, even networking. I mean, for real, and I already knew that much about it, but so it seemed to be like really it's getting to the OSHA and the triangle and the delta force as compared to isometric volume of like a high-rise building, and what that is to, OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, that's normally involved automatically with like construction of like huge commercial buildings and high-rises and safety factors. And my thought and the question being, hey, does OSHA go beyond construction? I mean, does it go beyond like the State of the Union address of actual position of, like the degrees, having their positions manufactured to where, when it's completed, being in what has been manufactured and designed, obviously of like eternal treasures and certain factors are like a Star is Born, that's why, hey, like, why not, I might as well be a Star is Born, right? Getting all airborne. A baptism, can you believe it, June 14th, 1992? I mean, it's like a huge secret. I mean, it's phenomenal. Can you believe it, huh? So, I thought, well, I might as well be the Star is Born and airborne, all about something about it. And why not, so like, I'm really thinking about that vision, the Visions Tower high-rise building thing, yeah. Yeah, the 75 floor thing, like right here, yeah, Pearland, Texas, yeah. Yeah, and the commercial venue is kind of like getting beyond, a local area network. It's living in a neighborhood. It's not that I have a whole perception of like what demanded standard really has ultimately been my thoughts for the last, even really truthfully since looking back at everything that's been going on and has happened even before June 14th, 1992, or what Flag Day is on a Saturday morning, SAT, June 14th, 1992. I mean, like Saturday in the SAT of the highest possible score. It's amazingly true. It seemed to be even 6 months after that. I mean, 6 seemed to be the number. Whether it's 6 years, 6 months, 6 days, 6 hours, has been, it. And ultimately, it's getting to, I'd mentioned, something about some vision thing, and something very much of perfect intent vision, believe me. And really, in any case, so like, that's what I think about, looking at that anyway. But anyway, in any case, yeah, so the thing is that ultimately it's getting to like the structure of like artificial, superficial architectural design between reverberation as compared to sustaining vibrato of the human factor, and what that is to a whole note, treble, double clef sheet music involving Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments and SOX compliance, huh? And all the practical application of principle and integration of what exponential quotient is to variables of powers of multiplication as compared to pi r squared seems to be the two of like placement of where variables would be in exponential position, and whether if a variable identified as an exponential based upon a position of what even the 0 degree, the degree being the little circle to the upper right of like the equator, the degree or even temperature in Fahrenheit or Celsius, and in that position of like where normally a variable of the exponent identifying that position, like the little 0 in degree of exponential quotients, yet a variable, and whether if the exponential, the exponent is going to be a variable of multiplication or simple addition and subtraction, like pi r squared is simple addition and subtraction of an exponent placed upon the position of normally identifying degree level, okay, and exponential quotient likewise with that variable of like multiplication as compared to the exponent of like a pi r squared, a simple addition and subtraction, yet it's a variable, and because of its position it's identified as an exponent. But an exponential quotient as compared to just an exponent is a simple difference of the same pronunciation, yet different in practical application of powers and principalities to such huge magnification. It's even representative of like supplemental security income, the acronym of the SSI and the International Space Station, the ISS, which is like a Pentagon Reserve reverse of the ISS of an international superstar, or the international superstar, or the supplemental security, or the superstar investment. And I really studied quite a bit because of, right. Believe me, it's really been something I had been like thinking about, because it got to the point during studying, I was almost thinking, you got to be kidding me, a world class, and it's like the biggest secret of presidents and governors, and probably only a direct, immediate, whether the word is even a descendant in presidential, executive, and legislative as compared to family law. I mean, it's like everything about it is like everyone having privileged information as compared to me. It's got to be more than a miracle. Well, why not? Why not be all that? So, like, I'm having something to say about it right now, right? So anyway, I mean, if all that privileged information is some thought of like information of like intellectual property of duration, or only what having fair use as third person only suggests as maybe someone else really not want to be used that way, or maybe even thought of maybe willingly being like, are you nuts? Not really, not really. I mean, but really, I mean, would it even be a known fact, or even allowed to be a known fact, at any given point? I mean, a high-rise building and managing an eternal treasury. A star is born, huh? So it's something getting to the isometric volume, like a representative. I mean, of like everyday academic terminology that's normally. I mean, it's so like really normally not even taught. I mean, just a simple pronunciation of like pi r squared applied to itself, not necessarily being used for a different direction, but the actual pronunciation of the computation of the formula itself applied to itself. I mean, it's almost like the figure eight and ice skater in perfect 10-10 vision about the square ultimately getting to a 90 degree of a symmetric asymmetrical triangle that way. Even principle of like 180 degrees of a protractor. I mean, ultimately, the triangle, the pyramid, the symmetrical asymmetrical of the square, normally representing simple addition to itself twice, yet symmetrical asymmetrical in the way of a square, being diagonal, being a triangle representative, maybe even the two triangles and a Star of David, but ultimately the ice skater in the figure eight in a way of what that power zoom lens in the planetarium is to like perfect 10-10 vision, in outer space, to such greatness of powered magnification. It's unreal, perfect 10-10 vision. And certain things about really what I've been looking at for years about something very much that yeah, for real. So anyway, something about a current resident that really, I mean, had gained a little bit more significance than really possibly yeah. So anyway, kind of like we've been thinking about something about that in the way of really what the United States Postal Service is to Calamity Jane, or prepaid postage, in a way of whether or not, if the history of the mailbox is only determining, what a checking account is or is not, or distinguish the difference between a rural route, or Route 66, or the pronunciation of route and route, or what that is to a checking account, a rural route, and the exclusionary rule provision, Wyatt Earp, huh? The Lord's Supper, can you believe it? Wyatt Earp, huh? Or the pro-life, the pro-supper, the Lord's Supper, the pros supper, yeah. The Super Bowl, it's the pro, and beyond the academics of what only religion might only present as only non-degreed, identified as classified as an opportunity. Yeah, so for real, okay. But anyway, so yeah, if that's only what equal opportunity only means to religion that way, well then you need to get above it, all right. So anyway, so I mean, if that's the only thing about in God we trust, and a local area network means to a normal standard of banking, or a whole new maybe perception that might lead to a whole different direction and thought pattern of an everyday normal routine, like daily standard of just like maybe not ignoring what each and every person is involved with. That's for real what I've been doing about myself, and something about the memory of even OSHA and construction of high rise and commercial venue, as well as maintenance, and what that is to a stationary engineer, or even what that means sitting in a car, or even a pilot, or even astronaut training of centrifugal force. Normally, centrifugal force is not necessarily the thought of weightlessness in space exploration. Yet it seems to be like the barrel of fun at Astroworld, ultimately turning to Six Flags. And the thing about the Six Flags is that six is like, what's that? Let me think about it. I think it's 52 real quick. 28, 48, 49, 50. It's 52 like heart. And heart being plural with an S is 71 in Pearland and like an act of God, okay? Well, the astronauts, use centrifugal force. What would be representative of what the barrel of fun at Astroworld used to be? Not necessarily a gyrotop, but it's been a known fact that some astronauts get in something that presents maybe an orbital gyro motion as a center point, not necessarily an external factor of real centrifugal force, but gyro in the way of like what core curriculum would only mean. As core curriculum being the center of like the entire planet, okay? Or what, the source of like, I don't know if I'd really call it atomic energy. But there's something about, the information like, science and the core, and what, volcanoes means to like the core curriculum or, fission and fusion or, atomic energy and like space exploration, identifying what a planet really looks like at a huge scale that way of core curriculum, normally identified as, the solar system is normally when the core curriculum of like atomic energy is normally signifying like the core center of the earth, and normally some kind of irrational eccentric way ultimately getting through the volcano and the core curriculum, or what that is, and dissipation, and I don't know if I'd call it rectification, but anyway, like anyway, so there's something about the Soviet Union and something about all that gold and what that is to, I mean, if it's really ultimately getting to the State of the Union, I mean, somewhere in my mind, based upon the information of whether if the exclusionary rule provision is suggesting a method of banking in a way of like a rural route, or Route 66 or routing, that way is a method of banking, or what like internet protocol is to like local area networks, or likewise. In addition, it seems to be like ultimately, having a walkthrough. I mean, even really, it's like the Stargate program and something about all the gold and red carpet, something about that. Walking through it, yeah. And I'm not sure. There've been other locations like it in Geneva, Switzerland, the BeinVenue that was both, the James Madison Dolly as well as the Gurney and like Life Flight. I mean, it all over different places around. I mean, the entire world, and having something about the memory. I mean, it's such a huge secret. I'm kind of like, phenomenally like not even finding it amusingly humorous. Yet there's humor and there's something of concern at when, years and years have passed by and decades, and find a little bit of humor. I mean, I know it's a long time ago, but realizing something for the first time years after, and feeling a little bit kind of in disbelief of like only that traumatic in a way of like an issue like memory, and the knowing that military is that experience probably, like a daily standard. I mean, I'm so for real for sure that they're that experience, and me not being the total idiot is knowing something ridiculously not humorously funny about it. But anyway, so anyway, it's something about that, and ultimately it seems to be like getting to whether or not if that experience is, going to, maintain, some discipline, a prioritization within, if the parameters of like tolerance is like, me trying to stay calm sometimes is like really, I really do, but really not humorous in a way. But anyway, so it's kind of like I was thinking about something about the OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, and what that is to like architectural design of reverberation, or what might represent an implied version of what only reverberation means as a ergonomic, artificial, based upon whether the human factor is really the issue or not, as a result of a similarity as compared to like sustained vibrato would mean, and the whole note, okay, and like the awesome powers, Blue Bonnet Imperial Eagle, and what that is to ACTP colon, I can't believe it's butter thing about that, and the semicolon, and for real, a little bit of humor, but the whole note treble double clef seems to be the deal about the sheet music and Sarbanes-Oxley financial instruments and stock compliance in a way. And I'm just now thinking about it. I was wanting to get in. It's already going on like pretty close to like 50 minutes already, and I could probably talk, I mean, non-stop, I mean, for probably simply and easily, you know, months, if not years, about some of this stuff. I mean, really, because I mean, I have like really put a lot of time into it, years and years and years, about just thinking about it, really, because it has ultimately getting to the availability of information or even refreshing my memory on so many things of alphanumerics and linguistics that I was like really studying in every possible way. And the same information being provided was like slowly not happening. And actually, depending upon, it got that frustrating just to refresh my memory to confirm making a decision, and really only that or something new. But spent, you know, maybe a week reading only to discover maybe one paragraph, one sentence, one paragraph, one page. It totally like, totally, totally redirected the "you got to be kidding me" kind of like thing, and got that frustrating about already knowing that much about it. And so I just really quit looking for, you know, confirmation, affirmation, you know, supporting my own memory that way. And I just really quit doing it because it's obviously something about a world class in my mind, but just the information that was like so readily available, yet disregarded based upon, you know, I'm assuming that would even be the thought of like a birth year of 1964, Representative 64 being an American in the movie, Israel, and the thing about even religion and the 12 Federal Reserve Banks and 12 tribes of Israel, or the 12 volt direct circuit of like electronic power being like 181 Houston, Texas, and, you know, WIA International, and, you know, Selective Service, and the Houston, Texas thing about the alphanumerics 181, or Paraland, Texas, USA, or alphanumerics USA, and attenuation being the electronic thing about, you know, processing speed of digital signal processing, sometimes even involving, you know, waveform and special effects of sequencing, you know, beyond, you know, what would be maybe a limit of a 13-band graphic equalizer, thoroughly dependent upon, you know, measuring cycles per second, only of spectrum and bandwidth, and the speed of that affecting its tone and pitch. Predominantly, you know, the thing about 13-band graphic equalizer, but the big deal about the night vision, the impedance and ambience that way, and it's really getting frustrating about, you know, something about, you know, Wi-Fi managers and webmasters, or what networking means to an internet protocol of like a local area network, or one word that I'd call 611 and C-Mobile, and it's not the first time or the only one, saying, hey man, like, what's going on with like YouTube, okay? Because, you know, YouTube puts on, and it wasn't even available when I started like recording, you know, what I use as a standard as a drummer or a singer, and that's on my youtube.com channel, Wade ASV Pretty. But like I was referring to like impedance and ambience, you know, ambience being the pastel green, even, you know, like the color code of world history, or, you know, the executive thing about, you know, the province, you know, in my mind, even the Garden of Eden and the golf course in a way. I mean, for landscaping, I mean, you know, you got to be kidding me. And what the pastel green is, even the color code of like jurisprudence, you know, on the other hand, with a black back, by comparison, whether it's going to be the issue of like texture and the cover of whether it's, you know, considered, you know, some fine or like coarse, you know, like texture of like a book cover. You know, think about the book cover of jurisprudence being a pastel green with the black back, and what that is or is not to a golf course or province in world history, or the executive current event or relationship in that way of like architecture and platform, or whether or not of the, you know, the thought of an operator, or an equator, or, you know, network operations that way is only, you know, the factor of whether or not if embedded encryption is only the suggestion of like whether of having fair use is only a reputable standard of consensual participation at a degree level, as compared to only a classified ad that might only represent equal employment opportunity, or even maybe the neglect based upon lack of experience of even associates, you know, you know, just a real quick, just to say it, in need of higher education, you know, really in my education, just to me, just isn't a word really anymore at any degree level beyond, you know, and associates, you know, there might be some transition, but as a minimum requirement on a major university being a 4-year bachelor, I mean, really, I mean, there is segregation. I mean, just on the fact of economics and the method of banking of generations of a known fact, and how information is really used of neighborhoods of degree levels that maybe may or may not live on a golf course or like a commercial venue of living quarters. I mean, it's ultimately got to the bicentennial quarter, and even my birth year, and I'm almost finding it not hard to believe, I mean, at all anymore about, the 200-year celebration and what a living quarter is to a bicentennial quarter, and bicentennial being 108, like operator in Chevrolet that way, or the zero being 64 of an operator, still likewise, HTTP, the colon double forward slash, and, the 64 thing about Israel and American, and what zero is that way to the operator, or the equator, or, the 90-degree right angle thing about, the one latitude. In my mind, of like, Christopher Columbus and the Lee Iacocca acceptance speech at Plymouth Rock, as a 90 degree, as a point of origin, all the way down to Columbus that way. I mean, of a 90 degree right angle of the equator seemed to be one, and something in my mind of Australia, another. It seemed to be ultimately getting to the marginal spread of a tennis court, being singles identified with two players, and doubles being like, the thing about computer programming, using only two numbers in sequencing characterization of sets of four, like doubles is, identified on a tennis court. Only two people, only two numbers, whether it represents a motion picture region of 0 and 1, or an operator worldwide, live via satellite, as compared to like region 1 being like the United States and Canada, or what the equator is, in that way, to like, legal media, auditing legal media and deposition, or, proclamation declarations in the mayor's office, or what constitutional law in space exploration only means to a black dot on a map, or if family law is even a reality with anyone who is not on YouTube, or, television, or, I direct quite a bit, identifying titles on my YouTube.com channel to like DirecTV, and thoroughly suggest, that DirecTV and YouTube direct like every word, to where the word's at degree level of like, some real degree level of experience of involving circuit, even predominantly as like a minimum requirement. Even, I see as, the Fox 29 News in Philadelphia, seemingly ultimately, getting to, the 200-year celebration of like involving Independence Day, or what that is to even Geneva, Switzerland, or human civil rights, is, I mean, as a very minimal, basic. And if only Fox 29 News in Philadelphia only represents maybe a non-degreed issue, still yet in all, a separation between church and state of a minimal requirement of Grover Cleveland, and, Zion being 64, what the operator 0 is 64, and yet 0's an operator in 108 in Chevrolet and Bicentennial, and I'm a drummer, and what that is to the quarter, a living quarter, commercial venue of living quarter, what a neighborhood might only maybe seem as insignificant, or maybe, what a neighborhood is, or what a person might not even know a neighborhood is even involved with. It's kind of like, even to, this point, like parental guidance has gotten to like this same location, like a 1965 thing of my parents. And really, I'm not even sure if my parents were involved, although it is his location, of like something of Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, and Barbara Walters from 2020 to like the television series The View, and something about diapers. I mean, it's ultimately getting to like I was born in 1964, and really my first memory throughout my entire life from 1964, based on my perception, and I think my very first thought of like being able to even open my eyes was like 3 lights above me, what would be in my mind an operating room in the pastel green, and some like thought of like a anesthesia in the mask over. I mean, it's like the very first thought I remember completely. I think it is probably my first thought that I can even possibly comprehend remembering anything, is the pastel green of the architecture, and the 3 lights above. It's almost like a thing about and then the gas. I'm not even sure if the ice skating cartoon animation of Anastasia is representing that fact of a birth year of 1964. If Anastasia, I think it's about even ice capades. Anastasia, I think it is something of the ice thing, ultimately getting to the figure 8 and the pi squared of like perfect 10-10 vision, that way of like, I mean, proper English grammatical composition, alphanumerics and linguistics, I mean, for real. And, yeah, so anyways, like, it's getting real close to 1 hour right now, And, I'm not real sure. I'm going to actually kind of like refresh my memory about the Anastasia. It's like a cartoon animation. I think somehow in my mind, I'm going to have, I never watched it, okay? But my first thought was like anesthesia and ice skating. And for real, it seems to be like where I'm at, like, God, like from this is year 2023. I mean, for real, like world history and world class for real, right? So anyway, it's kind of like, I'm going to have to like kind of look at that real quick and think about it. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of like it's getting to the front lines of the beachfront and a delta force and a schematic of a triangle representing even Egypt and a pyramid, or maybe the one pronoun that cannot be used as a subject of the four types of pronouns. I mean, really, I mean, is there anything that hasn't happened, really? Or is that only international law having fair use of what only, maybe a neighborhood only means as a non-degreed? Or maybe what third world only means? So, I mean, an entire television network, or, what that is in intellectual duration of programming and language that way, or, what the acronym is at a degree level, whether the acronym is involved with the circuit, like or not. Is ultimately, whether or not the separation between church and state is ultimately going to be the deal about the equator and 9 degree of an equator, resulting in some thought in my mind of something of a marginal spread of like even New York Stock Exchange terminology involving commercial paper. It's like even the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, yet commercial paper identified normally as not necessarily, a voucher, although commercial paper seems to be the thing, even the book of the House of Cards, normally involving hedge funds and international monetary funds, and even terminology in that book, and it seems to be the book about, even the diamonds and Chevrolet Geoprism, and what Geoprism is, Geoprison, is to, using a Z instead of an S with Geoprism, Chevrolet Geoprism, prism being used with a Z, and the M is N, and the reverse from M is N, the N is M, and 13 is 14, 14 is 13, which is ultimately the reserve reverse, and intelligence and opposite of like, reversing alphabet. Geoprism is geoprism. It's like a 247, 109 is 110, and like Los Angeles, that way of 109, and what that area code 213 is, 109 being 213 is 110, is like the latest area code of 323, this year being the year 2023, November. And, there's Robert Plant, pictures at 11, and it almost seems to be like, I mean, my memory of just like, practicing my drums of that one particular deal, it seemed to be like something of pictures and really a LASIK laser corrective eye surgery. I mean, in my mind, in my mailbox, a coupon. And, I'm not going to continue to do that because I'm not going to just assume really anything about it, but it seemed to be, something in my mailbox. I mean, that really, I mean, who wouldn't, ultimately. But anyway, yeah, so I was thinking about that and what the current residence is to maybe Club Med or a network of like hospitals or circuit, or, maybe what a minimum requirement hospital being 100 or a quarter. What a living quarter is, whether UN sanction is only reflected, maybe the thought of whether if the North American Free Trade Act or the NATO North Atlantic Treaties Organization is only the thought of like everything I'm talking about, okay? Going through a circuit, or like Geneva, Switzerland, reflecting a summit meeting involving, human civil rights in the form of human capital investment terminology beyond like a local area network of internet protocol, of like local area networks and like a local banking situation, or, going beyond a method of banking, into, maybe even beyond the thought of investment, or, the thought of having earned the vesture and, having earned the stature, and what that is to, the ERISA statute of, state statutes annotated as compared to the IRA involving, the Internal Revenue Service, or, any distinguishable difference of, like, ultimately getting to importing and exporting, and what the duration of, like, non-taxable income is, or what the thought of, like, international waters, whether the tariff is only representative of only what's protected, whether it's within or without, entering and exiting the United States of tariff normally is protected, what was then 200 miles of protected waters, and if it's like 300, I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm almost assuming that it will be, if it's not yet, 300 miles of protected water, being the tricentennial quarter issue, right, of like a yeah, of 1976 to, 2076, as compared to 1976 of a Richard Nixon presidential administration. Not exactly, but there's the cumulative rollover thing about that. Yeah, for real. And what Nixon is to the African Americans of 76, and the 1776 to the 1976 deal about capital being, the thought of what we international is or is not of human capital or a method of banking. I mean, for real. Um, or going beyond the classified ads of only equal employment might only mean to only opportunity as non-degreed, and still yet international law of having fair use would only distinguish the difference between whether maritime law is a factor, going beyond a maritime law or liquidable equity in a way of what third person or third party only means as the easement or escrow itself, thoroughly using a whole different perspective. Ultimately, the connectivity of my mind, religion, ultimately getting to the bird, and ultimately the blue and purple bird of Israel, and the difference between the color code of like night vision, being the deep star 6, or even Egypt that way of like statues annotated, or the black bird of like Pharaoh, a pagan idolatry, or what that really is, and the thought of even the 6-point star being the Star of David, the religious Christianity thing about the Star of David, and the bird of Israel being the whoopa. It's amazingly like, the whopper of the Ohio Silver exclusionary rule provision of executive powers, governmental amnesties, and sovereign immunities, yet leads to Israel, once again, the African Americans of like Zion in 64, an operator, being the zero and the equator, and all that stuff about it, okay? And the thing of it is that the blue and purple bird is the African Americans of 128. Blue and purple, okay? Purple is 88 and blue is 40 for 128. FM 1128 is right here in Pearland, Texas. Manville Highway, Old Massey Highway. I mean, probably, I haven't even to this day. I mean, I'm just now, going beyond, knowing and really getting serious. I mean, is it really 0.58? The alphanumerics of the symbolic representation on the backside of the $1 bill. The minimum requirement of the most three simple methods of computation, the simplest of the three methods of addition, equaling 58 of that symbolic representation between the C and the PTIS. PTIS being 64 on the upper right side of the pyramid above the little eye, triangular eye thing about the word identified as deity with the Treasury Department. The word is deity with like the United States Treasury identifying that eye, what might even be representative of like a exponential quotients in a way of powers and principalities of like the degree thing about, the pronunciation, proper English numerical composition. I, me, myself, me, myself, and I, and all that stuff. And what that is to like three of like I, myself, and me, myself, and I. And the three thing about proper English numerical composition, or the pi squared being the 3 point, or Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or the Trinity, or think about the river, and at the same time the baptism. Yeah, for real. And even my thought of Mercedes-Benz, the 3 point thing, even of the triangle identified as a delta, and the pi squared of like the triangle being added to itself twice, being the 6-point star of like David, the code blue of like Israel, ultimately getting to the bird, blue and purple being 128, and the thing about Zion and 1,000 Years of Peace, and even Nostradamus, narrated by Orson Welles, and Nostradamus, based upon Orson Welles' narration of Nostradamus, seems to be ultimately getting to Papermate and Pinocchio. Nostradamus, for real, Pinocchio, huh? And Pinocchio's on deck with the highest on deck ERA average, huh? Yeah. The pitch, and it's a line drive, and it's a fielder's choice, and why not? Hey, in any case, yeah. So like anyway, so like all that old time baseball stuff about like the Mickey Mantle flying swordfish, the Mickey Mantle no fly zone, or what that is to the Marlin. The Marlon Brando thing, the one, it's you've seen the commercial probably for the Marines forging steel with the sword, and you've probably heard in religion, and you probably heard it, the pen is mightier than a sword, yet you've probably heard it both ways. God's word is like a fire, and God's word is something more than a two-edged sword. I actually have to think about it. And if the two-edged sword only represents pi r squared, and that schematic of a triangle, or what Egypt is to a triangle, or what the firstborn of like Pharaoh only represents to immigration and customs enforcement, or deportation, or or something of like even North Atlantic Treaties Organization, or North American Free Trade Act. Hey, I'm really not finding anything like amusingly humorous about something about a memory. But anyway, so it seems to be like ultimately getting to like OSHA and the absentee voting. It's like the year 2024, the sixth presidential term. This seems to be so significant of like from Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt of the New Deal Act, and not limited to, but ultimately seemingly of Sarbanes-Oxley, financial instruments and SOX compliance in the United States Codes Annotated, what that is to the New Testament of the King James Version Bible, as compared to James Bond, or what the mode is to the misappropriation of allocation of like the Mississippi River, of like kingsmanship in a castle with a moat in the form of like what's a deep trench with water around it, and what that is to tariff of importing and exporting of protected waters. Okay, I mean, ultimately it's getting to the English Parliament, and in England, whether, you might think that being naive to the Parliament or the golf course, or English would only represent maybe whether or not having the appearance thereof, but denying, having a form of godliness, but denying the appearance thereof. I mean, it's ultimately getting to information involving supplemental security income, which is actually a benefit that's normally identified as being earned based upon employment or the availability of anything other than an IRA, where it's even used as a retirement, or like really even the acronym even being in any kind of way associated with only what would be maybe considered a designating as itemized, ultimately itemization getting to the alphabetical 141 and the expenditure. And what the recent statute is of color code, in my mind, something of the Deep Star 6 and statutes annotated, state statutes annotated of Vernon's, and what the Vernon's is to non-degreed, and what the VER is only to, the thought of V being 22. V is the 22nd letter, and there's only 22 letters in the Japanese alphabet, according to only the information that I've seen. Okay, it all looks symbolic to me, and that's really probably me knowing that's all I need to think, and probably would be anticipated that I would think that Japanese just looks symbolic to me. And really it does, and really that's maybe all I need to know about it. But anyway, it's ultimately getting to its structure in quantum, and like Star Furniture commercial, different by design, that E thing, and that formula, and the structure is completely different than like really anything until it gets to quantum. I mean, the design and structure of the structure of the formula used in computation is almost like a symbolic representation, if not the same exact, of Japanese letters in the alphabet. And I think there's only one or two that maybe might only represent the thought of symbolic representation in the form of structure. Once again, getting to whether or not if OSHA is just the idea of like non-degreed issues involving construction or building being 78, or escrow, or FBI miracle, as compared to degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation, ultimately getting to, the simple difference of the word relation is the word between architecture and platform. Yet then there's the thing about the embedding encryption, the big four thing about the embedding encryption, or what opportunity might only mean as intellectual, or, what the thought of having fair use might only mean as a method of banking. Or what, reputable standards is it a degree level, or is it like only manufactured to be only the thought of, I mean, like it being, thought of like realizing what demographics might only mean to, whether the Ed McMahon descendancy of like enter now and enter the early bird, it seems to be the ultimately getting to the Israeli bird, or the Washington Post, the WP and Homeowners Association of a neighborhood, of non-degreed normally of neighborhoods. Washington Post, WP, like my first and last name, Wade Pretty P, WP, Washington Post, huh? I mean, is it the alpha omega of like HOA, the acronym of Homeowners Association, and the pronunciation of the bird, whoopa? Once again, yes, ultimately originating from the Ohio Silver of like the oldest governmental computer mainframe called the Whopper, getting to the kingsmanship of the mode and international import and exporting of the tariff. And once again, it's getting all the way back to the immigration customs enforcement and what that is to the kingship, totally separate, whether if citizenship is an issue of degree level and not necessarily considered in need of being geographically attached, having the amphibious part about J. Edgar Hoover. As the world turns, and above it all, above the categorization of money or non-degree that way of employment and classified ads, okay, and what that is, and what I have to say about it. Okay, it's already going on like an hour and 15 minutes, and like right at 23 seconds. And I'm kind of going to slow it down, but yeah, there's something about the absentee voting and the OSHA and the triangle and the bird. Okay, I was going to say this real quick about the bird being the whoopah of like Israel, being the whole entire point of origin of Christianity, according to yes the information during my lifetime. Okay, it's not beyond my concept that like in another century, maybe in a different language. I mean, come on, like I'm on this planet. I know that's all possible, right? So like involving Christianity. I mean, like Israel, it's like it. I mean, does it have to be Bethlehem? Does it have to be the manger? Or does it only mean maybe an acronym of the Sahara? Sarah, known as to be the most beautiful woman in the entire King James Version Bible. Is it the Sahara? The desert? I mean, is it the diamond thing about the book? Secret Simple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country. And De Beers Diamonds. I mean, like in Pearland, there used to be like a Pearl Bear, home of the 1100 Springs. As compared to, the boing, the guy thing about, like, hey, it's good to see you. Or, some humor about, thing about Boeing itself and, all that flight attendant and stuff about, Boeing in a way of like, yeah, all right. So anyway, so like, think about that. It's ultimately getting to a central time zone with Chicago. Yeah, ultimately it seemed to be the deal about the laser powered by atomic energy. As far as the information that I'm only aware of, that central time zone, I'm not sure if every time zone uses a laser to calibrate the accuracy for the longest duration of atomic energy. And it's with my impression that the central time zone is powered, calibrated to the most accuracy known of a laser beam powered by atomic energy. So anyway, yeah. So like that's what I think about that much. Anyways, it's I need to take a break. Anyway, it's going on for quite some time, but yeah, it's ultimately getting to something about the walking through something of the gold. I was like taking broadcasting in music video business and like television production and audio production at the Art Institute of Houston there on Yorktown, right next to, I mean, probably within 30 feet of the Marathon Oil. Woo, Marathon Oil, Tower of Power, huh? What was then, right there at San Felipe in Yorktown. In any case, in that area, in the Galleria area. And it seemed to me that ultimately is getting to whether or not the Marathon Oil is only representing the 26-mile marathon. The Z thing about Chevrolet Silverado Z and the Z offset and isometric volume of like a method of banking that seemed to be like whether or not if the signature is only a two-dimensional flat plane surface, or like once again back to it's ultimately getting to like sheet music and like Sarbanes-Oxley financial instruments SOX compliance of the thought of whether reverberation is only artificial superficial structural design as compared to the sustaining vibrato of like the human factor like singing, and what hop sing is the human factor of like measuring cycles per second oscillation. And the only two that are on the 13-band graphic equalizer, 13 being 99 and telepathic, or the 13 stars on the backside being something about, alphanumerics of 99. Even Chevy Chase is like geographically attached to the map in Washington, D.C., normally an automatic perception of the United States Department of Education. I believe it's a boulevard, yeah. I'm not sure if it's an avenue, but right, in any case. I mean, it's automatic perception that Chevy Chase is, the name, and the year of the presidential inaugural ball of 1992, William Jefferson Clinton, Al Gore, and Chevy Chase actually hosting that 1992 seems to be the big deal in my mind of like the Houston, Texas area of the alphanumerics of like Electronic Power We International, Houston, Texas, and Pearland, Texas, USA, Attenuation USA, and alphanumerics USA, and the list goes on and on. Purple Heart USA, and Pearland Home USA, Pearland USA, USA. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So like in any case, I mean, it's like a phenomenally huge secret, and really getting the word out anyway is almost frustrating. Thinking that YouTube having an option of whether or not if only a color code would represent maybe whether a sole proprietor is only the accusation of an acronym being used as the database administration with an option as doing business as, or come on, you got to be kidding me. Auditing legal media and deposition in the form of like the mayor's office of like proclamation declarations only presenting an issue whether if a color code is made, caviar and primate spawning be on the front lines of the beach run, identified as a black dot on a map, or, hey, who's going to go through the Garden of Eden all over again? Because, like, I think I've already been a little bit through that. I think it's a little bit more beyond the Garden of Eden with me now, or some idea of some province on a golf course. I mean, at least a 9-hole golf course, okay? I mean, if there's anything about the Garden of Eden representative of the Garden of Eden, there's some idea of world history or world class in a way of like province in a pastel green of the ambience of like American Amplified, and even the book, and how true it is about every book about the American Amplified Living Bible. I think it is the green. I don't think it's the pastel green, but I do believe that is the thing about the Sprite, the colors of Sprite. One is a pastel green, and the other, I'm not sure if it's a Kelly green, but Sprite has the two colors. One is a province of world history, being the province of, the pastel green. That's amazingly color code. And Sprite has both colors, and it's almost representative, like the golf course almost as compared to the jurisprudence with the black back. I mean, it's that close, knowing if that color code of the pastel green of the book, Jurisprudence in the Law Library, I mean, if it's the only exception of Technicolor, and everything about Technicolor is the exception probably of that fact between world class, world history identifying a pastel green as province as compared to the book and the law library. Normally all the way up to the Supreme Court normally is involving criminology. Not my thought of like it at all. And that's why, when litigation is involved, involving de facto, is normally predominantly dominated by General Motors. I've read so many cases about, that word. I was focusing quite a bit on that word, de facto, because of the alphanumerics. And some single difference between the alphanumerics of 52 and 54 are, the note, the love, being, whether legal tender is only a question of whether if the heart or, the two thing about the division or fission and fusion, a symbolic representation between a C and a PTIS on the backside of the $1 bill is almost like an anatomy or a projected estimate of an identical twin. Or the spirit of adoption, that way of like a telepathic birth. Many's perception of a telepathic birth might only be maybe, what someone having claimed might even, really get into it. But I've really spent years, thinking about quite a bit, looking that way biblically, and not limited to the King James Version Bible, also the Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, and other factors. So even evangelists, and, thought of like a liturgy as a public form of worship as compared to private. The word liturgy is normally associated as a public form of worship. And what that is between the note is legal tender for all debt, or is it really the debit? I mean, is everyone believing like what a version of publication means? Even on the U.S. dollar, the note is legal tender for all debt. Are you sure? Are you sure it's not debit? I mean, the I's on the back side of the U.S. $1 bill. I mean, does it need to be identified that hey man, you need to put the I in the word debt so it can be a debit, and it's not like really a deduction, but it's a credit, right? Who are you trying to kid, man? For real? You gotta be kidding me. Obviously, it's not a joke, okay? But there's that one word in the King James Version Bible, Joktan, Joktan. It's 71, and it's amazing. What's that supposed to mean? The Joe King and the Sheriff's Department of Brazoria It's it's not. He's not joking. What is it? 71 Pearland Joe Ken? You kidding me? Sheriff's Department? Wait a minute, wait a minute. Are you sure you're not referring to like corporate executive officers involving shareholding and really jurisdiction is really not the word? Although the separation between church and state seems to be the big deal between the U.S. dollar, like Grover Cleveland, as a minimum requirement of Zion being the 64 thing about the zero and the operator and the bicentennial. Are you kidding me? The operator in Chevrolet and Z71. Oh, God, you got the isometric volume. Z, huh? The Z offset of isometric volume. Seemingly the big deal beyond a normal standard practice of a daily transaction at the bank. Whether or not if the signature of an endorsement is only considered whether if it's isometric or three-dimensional of actual participation. I mean, is it like a living quarter issue? Whether it's a commercial paper identifying whether or not if a commercial venue has a fixture in real estate that identifies the commercial living quarter of like a commercial venue as compared to a neighborhood? I mean, you kidding me? So, like, that's really why, really, I mean, at this point, I mean, in addition to, like, everything, like, I was all about building all the way through the circuit and everything that was happening, I mean, finding anything negative in any kind of way is, like, right back to this address, like, directly, having some, like, real experience that's, like, really affecting my mood, okay? But in any case, yeah, so, like, really trying to, everything going to Washington, D.C., it's like, even representing anything like is going on that might represent maybe anything nice, okay? Wasn't really anything I sent to Washington, D.C. other than an overabundant amount of, like, equations of, like, alphanumerics and linguistics. And, like, build a whole bunch of eternal treasuries on Highway 288, yeah. Yeah. To change an entire geographical area, not that, some, like, guy, okay, of some Stargate program, or the psychic warrior, okay? A baptism, can you believe it? June 14th, a flag day. Friendswood, Texas, huh? A Mormon. It's like 88, isn't it? Like New Deal Act, huh? Mormon, it's like 88, like California, right? A baptism. June 14th, a Saturday. Really, I'm really not finding any amusement about, like, filling and maybe directing maybe a tone of voice, right? In any case, yeah, so like yeah, okay. Well then, yeah, okay then. In any case, yeah, so like yeah. In any case, yeah, so like a flag day. North American Free Trade Act, huh? So, I mean, like, I'm like right here having this to say about, like, this now, right? Amazing. A high-rise, huh? OSHA. The ocean. In God we trust? Are you in God, man? Are you like in the absentee voting of like you bathed in the ocean, getting cleansed with Lawrence with the operator? Are you kidding me? A high-rise, a star is born, huh? Getting all airborne beyond local area network of internet protocol, huh? YouTube. One word of me talking about impedance and ambience, and something that I know, ambience being green and pastel green, identified as some. See, that's what I'm not liking. I mean, is someone like presenting the issue of editing as a standard of using a standard, or deviating the thought of like maybe what piracy is or is not in maritime law as compared to a degree level? And it seems to be the only issue of degree level, whether if piracy is only the thought of maybe a non-degreed issue, as compared to a degreed issue involving maybe what only might be infringement of royalties, like a bunch of crap. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to like who's going to believe who over like degreed terminology or the experience, I mean, really, is legal media really the issue, or who's in control of the webmaster and the Wi-Fi manager, or maybe even networking involving a VPN and all that great stuff about the alphanumerics of 52, or like a heart god. How true it is about, some telepathic, birth, about some mental telepathy minus God, equal Holy Spirit, or, Secret Service, or Jesus Christ, really, I'm really, thinking that something about the thought of going beyond, the thought of whether or not a VPN is only a vice president network, or maybe, the thought of maybe virtual personal network would only be the thought of like, who's going to believe who, like once again, or is it like via plenipotentiary network, or like once again international law having fair use of access easement, whether or not the experiences, maybe, had it been they themselves, only represents maybe, once again, what managing factors only means to, like, even being on SSI to begin with, or, being allowed to know going through the circuit. It's amazingly true. Fighting for an eternal treasury. OSHA, huh? Ultimately getting to the equator, huh? The absentee voting, huh? Or is it the occupational safety? The operator, huh? The ocean, huh? The biggest mouth, misappropriation and allocation of Mississippi River, huh? The biggest mouth of the river, huh? Involving the ocean, huh? YouTube, huh? So, I mean, it's an option of, like, whether editing is only an issue of whether a Wi-Fi manager or a webmaster is only presenting, whether or not if editing is only a YouTube suite and a YouTube studio that's not available, then it's available, and whether editing or publishing anything is really even going to matter, or really even the place or time for any of it to begin with. Edit what? Publish what? I mean, is there like a claim of like degree level of accusation, being all 140 about the word, parallel and sexist accusation? I mean, is there an accusation at degree level or reputable standards, presenting maybe the non-degreed, only what classified ad means to maybe only opportunity of management? It's ultimately like, really, who's laughing, right? So anyway, yeah, I thought I'd have that much to say. Well, anyway, well, good. Have a good day, really. Really, have a good one, yeah.